Cavecast, the uncensored show for nerds of all kinds.
For everybody that is clicking on this episode, that is checking this out, first off, thank you. Secondly, I want to give a good idea about what this episode is going to be. This is not necessarily a review of The Breakfast Club. This is not a, did I like the movie or whatever, I'm going to give it a score. No, we both love and adore this movie. We've grown up with it for just no editing. We watched this movie last night, and I've been thinking about things all day and the things that were coming up. And this movie is so powerful, and there's so much to talk about, and why this movie is just so damn good, and why I think that it is even relevant to this day. And John Hughes, for sure, just did something amazing, not only with all of his films, but this one is so special because it's so unique, because it's not, the idea of, like a family member is visiting, or I'm trying to make it home for the holidays, or like things like that. Like, no, dude, this is just kids that are stuck in detention. It's so simple.
I would argue that it might be his like most known, or I'm going to say most known, but probably best film.
Yeah.
I know he's done a lot of films, and that's some mighty words, but you're right. It's not some holiday special or whatever it is. Like, all those like, ones that tug at your heart like that. Like, no, this was real shit. Like, this was real life stuff that was happening.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, is that if you guys hear a cat in the background, it's Ambrose. He's probably not going to shut up, but I'm just going to tune him out. Usually if you ignore him for about 10 minutes, he goes away. So, but nevertheless, is that when I think about this movie and think about just the way that I grew up with it, because I honestly was very, very young when this movie was being shown in the house. And I was interested in it because kids were cussing. They're like, I saw you and my parents like laugh at it or whatever, where it's like, all right, cool. But as I got older, I started to understand that there's way more to this. And what I'm curious about is your perspective of like the age you were when you watched it, the first time that you watched it, the things it did to you. Like, I mean, like, what was it like experiencing The Breakfast Club at the age that you were? Because I can't even fathom it. It's so different.
I really don't. I couldn't say like an actual age, because it's one of those movies that I think I just always remembered. I want to say it came out like either, I forget what year it came out. Like, I wasn't that old, or maybe just kind of born, but I remember watching it like basically when I can remember, like just watching movies. So probably like, I don't know, 5, 4. And I remember it being a really good movie, and I don't understand why I liked it so much, even as a kid. It is very adult, like
very.
It's not like, it does have funny moments, but it wasn't like this comedy or anything like that. Like, I don't know. It was weird that I enjoyed it, but I watched it over and over again, and I wanted to be John Bender.
Yeah,
like I wanted to fucking be John Bender.
Well, because even. Like, we watched this movie last night, and as we said, this is not going to be a review. This is not going to be anything like that. This is kind of almost like an in-depth, almost kind of just conversation between brothers, in that kind of way
about the movie. Yeah,
and it's so interesting to me because this movie genuinely, like, you're right, like, it is very adult. There is a lot of like the jokes and stuff that Bender says, and like how he's treating Molly Ringwald's character and everything. Like, it's borderline harassing in that aspect of like
some points.
But what's interesting is that how they always reel it back, where it's like, yes, like, you get to see this, almost ick and muck kind of come out. But in the same hand, there's these moments that I really feel that it was the director and the actor talking about, hey, this is what it says in the script. You're not going to say it. You're going to show it in body language. You're going to make certain things happen. Like, rewatching this movie last night and being able to, quote it the entire time, and like,
poor Meg.
Oh, dude, she was such a trooper, but she was quoting it with us.
Yeah,
as well,
she
too.
was.
So, but man, it was crazy to see all those things. So yeah, like it's a very adult film, and the fact that I think that it deals with essentially kids, it's kind of jarring in that way. Like, it's like, man, like, especially John's story, and then, like, you learn about everybody else too, which we're going to get into, but it's, man, like, they really were kind of forced to kind of grow up a little quicker than everybody else in a way, or like it kind of like displayed that. I mean, that's something that I definitely, resonate with in a way, but it's so unique that it's from so many different perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so crazy. So getting into this, let's talk about some specific characters. And I think that what's interesting, how you brought it up before, and I think it was on the Villains podcast that we talked about this, was that we were talking about our favorite villains, like top 5 or whatever. And we said things like Thanos, the Joker, and like things like that. But what got brought up was the principal from The Breakfast Club.
That was one of my villains.
Yes. And what's funny is that that he's essentially an asshole in the movie. Well, kind of, there's a bit of a process for him to get there, but it's like, man, like he really is the antagonist. Like he's the one that, even though he is the one that is keeping order and is correcting them, he becomes this thing. Like it's so weird.
The reason, so you're right. The reason I always stated that, like, he was the villain, like you said, he is the one that's supposed to be keeping order, but he's a fucking dick. And the thing is that while he gets bored throughout the day, just like them, but like when he's playing with his stuff, but it's like he enjoys that power, but now he's got to sit through it as well. I mean, I guess the fact that, maybe he was trying to get something out of Bender as far as like being an upstanding citizen, but he wasn't. He knew Bender was a bully and kind of a fuck up, so he treated him like garbage. Like just garbage. And it just, the fact that then he's downstairs reading the personal files, like the principal's fucking scum.
He's like, oh, no wonder he's so fucked up. Or whatever. It's like, dude, and by the way, I think we should say this, is that this is going to be a spoiler talk. Like we're going to talk about very specific things and talk about the plot. So if you've not seen this movie and don't want it spoiled for you, definitely don't check it out. But if you have seen it and want to see the discussion, go for it. But yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just the fact that like that always like stuck with me, because it's supposed to be Bender. Bender is supposed to be the bad guy. He's he's the bad influence and stuff, but you find out a lot about him.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were actually talking about it last night when he was bullying him in the one room when he took him after they like roamed the halls. And you could see it in him, because now it was like almost like his dad, like Mom was saying, where it's like there's somebody that's bigger than him and nobody's going to believe him if he does anything.
No. And I think that, I mean, we're going to get definitely more into John, but it was this idea that I think that there's this beautiful irony to that, in that the principal essentially like we have that moment where like when detention first kind of starts and he's like, John, he's like, if you would apply yourself and do something, you would be very surprised as to what you would get. And I think that was kind of like his last shred of humanity in dealing with John, because really like what this movie is that we get to view 8 hours into these characters' lives and then we get nothing else.
Yeah.
We don't know what it was like for John for the past like 3 years or whatever, or 2 years, depending on if he's like a sophomore or whatever. Like the principal has been dealing with him. And I think that this is really what like broke everything, like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like after that is when he really starts to resort to more of like, like he is inherently a dick, but now it's I'm not a principal anymore. I'm a man and I'm talking to you. And it's got that, demeaning thing. And how crazy is it that when he finally snaps and has that moment with him, the principal doesn't understand what this is to John.
Yes.
And he keeps pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And it's like, yes, he is an asshole, but he is somebody that's had enough. Like it's that idea where it's like you can probably come to hate him for some of the things that he's done, but ultimately he's doing this out of ignorance and desperation.
Right.
And it, again, does not justify his actions, but it's like there's so many things to these characters where it's like, no, like he probably is semi-aware of his home life, but
but not like he has no idea, like the kids end up finding out, when you get that whole in-depth thing.
Yeah.
That was actually one thing, as seeing this movie at such a young age and growing up with it and watching it all the time, whether it just be on TV or repeat on a DVD or VHS. It was the fact of there was a certain point when certain things started to make sense to me because I was a little more grown up and figured it out. And the cigar burn on him, like for a long time, I didn't understand what that was, like what was happening right there in that scene fully.
Yeah.
And then finally one day it clicked. I'm like, oh, his dad's a fucking abusive dick. Like he's just a prick. Like, And it's just like, that was his punishment. So yeah, it's just like, it took, some things took a little while to like kick in for me, but dude, yeah, you're right. Like, he probably knew some things, but he didn't know all of that stuff.
No. And what's interesting is that as much as I despise the character, because like that just does nothing but just fuel my thermometer the entire time when he's doing that to John, because it's like, dude, like, stop.
Right.
Like, it's like, you made your point. You're locking him in a closet. Like, we get this, but what's interesting about the conversation that happens between the principal and the janitor later on, when they're having beers and they're just like, finally, like, the janitor's like, all right, man. Yeah. He's like, I get what you're doing. It's like, I'm not going to tell anybody. Give me $50.
Yeah, $50. Yeah.
And when he talks about it, where he's like, man, I've been teaching for, 22 years.
Something like that. Yeah.
And he says, man, like, these kids, every year they get worse and they get worse. And
he's like, nah, man, they didn't change. You did.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the truth. But then there was that other line that he says after. He's like, what wakes me up in the middle of the night, that when I grow old, these kids are going to take care of me. And he's like, don't count on it, man. Like, especially you, like, I never understood if it was supposed to be, I think I do, but if it was supposed to be like, no, don't count on it, they're not going to take care of anybody, or if he meant like specifically him.
No,
like,
right. It's like, no, like, they're not going to do that for you at all. Like,
yeah. But it's just the fact that, like, dude, we could talk the whole night on just the principal.
Oh yes, yeah.
And John, but like, no, man, like there are things that, like, in that movie, just, I think the script alone, there probably wasn't a whole lot that maybe they veered off of, because I feel like that writing was so tight.
Yeah, this is probably some of John Hughes' best writing, and like in how these conversations happen, because again, like, there are moments of action in this film, like when they're running through the halls and like they're trying to get the weed and like all that stuff. Like,
don't you want to hear my excuse?
Yeah, right. Which again, like the whole John's wearing, we're motioning into John now, but it's like, yeah, that whole idea where, isn't it interesting that, was it you or Mom that brought it up, where it was just like, nah, dude, John sacrificed himself.
I did. I was like, where the fact of where he's like, no, just me, because
I want to be an Air Force Ranger.
Yeah. But it was the fact that he also knew it wouldn't be out of character for him to be the one roaming the halls and doing all this stuff, because everybody else was going to sit and do what they're supposed to do, essentially. The principal knows enough about them to know that, at least, and so did John.
Right.
And the fact that they didn't listen to John, because, it's like, why wouldn't you have listened to him? He knows this school back and forth like that.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that he sacrificed himself, and then you brought up the fact that if it wouldn't have been for John, they wouldn't have been able to have the day that they did with the door being closed.
Dude, I love this so much, because when you're coming into this movie for the first time, and that's really what I tried to do when we rewatched it, was like, look, I need to strip myself of all the events that I know that are going to happen. I need to take this in as an adult properly. And I need to, like, not be like, oh, let's celebrate it. It's like, no, like, let the story unfold.
Yeah.
Let me see how this feels, like, with the pacing and stuff. And besides maybe a couple of moments where I was like, all right, like, dude, we get it. You don't have to pile on all this stuff or whatever. Like, the pacing of the movie is very, very good.
It is.
And this movie only works because of John Bender.
I was just about to say, like, he's kind of almost the backbone then, because of that, like you said. So
what's interesting is, like, he's like you said, he's the one, like, that gets the door shut. And after many failed attempts, like, the principal just, like, loses it or whatever. And it's like, he's the reason why, they get to smoke weed and why they get to hang out and they all bond and they do this thing. Like, it's, even like later on, like, whenever, like, they're having their fun moments and stuff, and like when he does chime in, like, you're starting to see that John is kind of softening a little bit here. Like, he has his abrasive moments, especially with the cigar, and like when he, like, goes off onto the staircase and like has his moment. But we see that he does come back to the group. He sits in the desk. They end up whistling, or like they're doing their thing. The whole, like, oh God, I can't remember the name of it, but the whole, like, song they do.
I forget what it's called too. Yeah.
It's, dude, as a kid, that was the moment that I would, like, fast forward to watch, because it was so fun. Not over here on a VHS. It's all a new setup. But man, it's just, John's character is so awesome. And I think that nobody else besides Judd Nelson could have done that. Like he had that way about him where it's like, yeah, like he is this good looking dude or whatever. So it makes sense as to why he was maybe, able to have so many girlfriends or so many people that he was sleeping with or hanging out with. But in the same hand is that he is tough. And
right.
I think that the moment that is really big for me that we were kind of telling Meg about it, where it was like, do you know what happens to the knife?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's this wonderful moment where, like, as a kid, I used to think that it was the bully getting bested and then just trying to find a way out. When he's like, I don't want to get into this with you, man.
Yeah.
And he's like, because I'll kill you. And it's like, because that's something that people just say. And then he does take out the knife.
Right.
Where it's like, no, Andrew, I will kill you. Like, if this keeps going and you piss me off enough, I will not be holding back.
Right.
And that, I think that adds a level of deepness into his character where I think even Andrew had that moment of, oh shit. And
yes.
And then Ali Sheedy's character reaches into the frame and grabs the knife.
So there was there's actually 2 points to that where I always thought was interesting. We were talking about last night, because not only is she a klepto, so she stole the knife, but she also de-escalated the situation completely right there, because now he can't stab anybody.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it's like, where the fuck did my knife? I don't know. Yeah. So she doesn't talk, sir. No. That was something that I think a lot of people actually missed for a long time. But like, I remember remembering that like quite early on, as far as like, oh, she stole it. Like,
what's interesting is that recently, as I've been, watching more and more movie reactors, is that I didn't notice the knife being grabbed until like maybe a couple weeks ago.
No shit,
dude. It's like, even what was the couple of moments was the 2 things that made it onto TV that they don't bleep out or that they don't cover up.
It's when after they that's very clever, sir, but what if there's a fire? What are you doing? Get these out of here. And he starts bitching at Andrew because he's like, I expect a little more out of a varsity letterman.
Yeah.
And he sits down and he gives him the finger like underneath his other hand, but it comes up for a second. So like on TBS and like USA, they never cut that out. I don't know if they just didn't see it or what. Then it's a few minutes later when he goes through all of that shit with like giving him all the detentions, and he screams, fuck you. And when he walks out, and even the principal is just like, and then Bender puts his head down and he goes, fuck. They never cut it out. Like, because he whispered. I don't know. Again, maybe their algorithm just missed all that shit.
I think
for years it was always in there.
It honestly could just be one of those things where it's like, when you look at mistakes in movies, like in general, like when we've talked about it, like the continuity of like somebody's cigarette, in different shots changing,
or like the amount of liquid in their glass.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then there's movies where there's no liquid in a glass that they're using. Like when somebody has a Starbucks coffee cup and they're doing this and talking, that is an empty cup.
Yeah.
Like, dude, guys, if you are a filmmaker and if you want to be very realistic with your movies, for the love of God, put something in your actor's cup when they're acting, because it's going to make it feel way more grounded. But man, it's insane to me just like how everything worked and came together. It's just like, because even in spite of that, it's like that stuff made it onto TV and nobody raised hell about it. It was like, because this movie is so natural and how everything goes, where it's like, I think that in a way, if, it's like when you watch it, when it's edited, it loses its impact. Like, it's like,
I was just about to say the fact that this is one of those movies. I have always said that the swearing is what makes the movie. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be super cuss words and, vulgar all of the time, but there are just sometimes when the word fuck comes across the way it needs to when you're talking in a sentence, or like whatever it is you're trying to do, with certain swear words. When it's done correctly, there's something powerful about it. And Mom has always agreed. Almost everybody that I've talked to, I'm like, when you watch it edited, it doesn't hit the same.
No,
because the feeling is behind all of these words.
Yeah.
So that is one of the few that's like, no, I need all the motherfucks in this.
Right.
So
Again, I think it kind of just adds into that adultness of everybody, is that, while the principal is there, everybody excluding, Bender, they're being as proper as they can be. Yes. Or even when they do retaliate, I don't think that they ever cuss at him. John Bender's the only one that does.
Yeah.
And it's like, when, again, it goes back into like kind of like what we're going to talk about with the ending, and ultimately the big reveal of everything is that they understand that they're way more similar than they thought. Like, it's, like everybody identifies with one of these people, growing up, like obviously I identified with Brian, like, you know, being the nerd and like, you know, maybe being awkward, and like I'm still awkward to this day. Like there's a lot of things that he does in that movie that I look back on, and it's like almost looking into a mirror, and I'm like, oh my God, like dude, John Hughes, well done. You know, so it's like I couldn't have done that, even, and I'm me, and I couldn't have written me that way, you know. So moving forward is that we got to talk about Claire.
Okay.
Claire is an interesting character, especially because Mom said something last night that I did not know. And I should have looked up the trailer, because, you know, it's like we don't think about these old movies and like how they were shown for theater release and stuff. But it's one of the best moments that she has with Ali Sheedy's character when she's doing her makeup. And Ali's like, why are you being so nice to me?
Because you're letting me.
Because you're letting me. And it's so interesting that somebody who is in popular status as her even had that moment of, this is nice. Like I can just sit with this, you know, this person that, you know, maybe I would, like my friends would make fun of or whatever, but it's like, she does open up in the circle, and she's like, you don't understand what it's like to have the friends that we do. Like peer pressure and everything in high school, especially being that young, I understand it.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, man, like for her to experience that with her is just, it's so beautiful. And ultimately what, you know, comes from that, and you know how it influences Andrew and everything like that. Like it's just, man, Claire's character, especially like, you know, when she opens up about her parents, and, you know, she's being very real, like, well, you know, I can't do this because my mom, but I should do this because of my dad.
Allison.
Like, yeah. It's just, it's this
is like,
right.
You know, and it's the whole fact of like, oh, you just wonder if you're feeling sorry, but so that's that scene right there. Like you're right. It does open up a lot, because you're hearing a lot about Claire, and you're getting her backstory, but then there's like this also kind of like spoiled rich girl thing happening as well.
Right. I mean, my God,
she calls her out.
She has sushi for lunch. So like,
yeah, dude, that's fucking crazy. Who brings sushi to fucking lunch?
Dude, I'm the more and more that I watch the film and I see Claire's scenes, is that you really don't see her hit her breaking point until the circle. Of like, like, you know, because I mean, Bender had his breaking point near the beginning about the abuse, and, you know, Brian, his definitely comes after Claire, and, you know, Ali like has her thing too. Like, but Claire's breaking point, and it's something that is so shitty that I'm sure kids probably even still do to this day, where it's like, you haven't had sex, you're a prude, but if you do, you're a slut. And it's like, it's that double-edged sword thing, like how she says it, and it's like, man, and the way she just unleashed, like, no, I've never done it. Okay, I never did it. Like, and it's like, it's that she's finally just over it. And that's when you realize it's like, okay, is she a tease, or is she just this girl that has been thrown into this situation because of the parents that she has, and she's had to just deal with it, and she's reaped the good things of it, that she doesn't get picked on and she doesn't have to worry about that stuff. But isn't it interesting that in such a high status as her, Andrew included, they're both still miserable.
Right.
It's again, all the kids are in this movie. It's so weird.
So like keeping on with Claire, and the fact of, like you said, you know, you do see the fact that I'm pretty sure that, you know, she was a virgin, because when Bender's talking to her and she's sitting there on, you know, the stuff that he's saying to her, and she's getting uncomfortable, that it's like she doesn't know how to respond. And then it's kind of like, why were they really talking about that later? Then they clearly know she hasn't had sex, in my opinion. Yeah. But like you said, it was that breaking point for her. And then, you know, talking about her friends, but you're right. Her status has kept her from being like, you know, picked on and the nerd and all this stuff. And then, kind of transferring into Andrew is that, I don't know, his was quite sad as well. Cause he's like, I'm just the workhorse. Yeah. Like I'm not even interested in what I'm doing. I just get picked because I got strength and speed, you know, and it's like, he's like, that's, you know, how involved I am in all this. It's like, he doesn't give a shit. No. He doesn't care. Like, and you know, the funny thing is, you think that, you know, stereotypical that him and Claire are going to get together, but like, it was kind of like one of the first original right hooks where they didn't in a movie. Yes. I mean, at least from what I saw, it's like, oh, the Jock got with the weird girl. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, this movie has so many things. And I think the fact that everybody's character had such a like interesting backstory, and very like you said, similar to each other. And they find that out about themselves, but it's like all of them are heartbreaking. Like they're heartbreaking.
Well, even transitioning into Allison, like in the way that Andrew just looks at her and he's like, what did they do to you?
Yeah.
And it's because he doesn't know what her problem is. He knows that she is very eccentric and she's, said I'm a compulsive liar, I'm a nymphomaniac, or all these things, like whatever. And just Allison's character is so interesting because we go from her studying everybody, even when she's walking with Andrew.
Yep.
And she's trying to pick everybody out and diagnose them and be like, all right, I know exactly what's going on. And the fact that she didn't even need to be there.
Right.
She could have left at any point in the day.
She's had nothing better to do.
And she got to experience finally another person talking to her, because she says it multiple times, I don't have any friends.
Right.
And for her to look at Andrew, and when she wells up and she's just like, they ignore me. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no wonder she doesn't have any friends. No wonder she is the way that she is. She has to make her own fun. No wonder her bag is full of everything she finds, because she can't let any of it go. And it's like, dude, it is heartbreaking. She's
insane. Almost like a forced basket case.
Yes.
Like made into one, like with no other option to do.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is that, again, for a while, I didn't understand the fact that she didn't have to be there.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and then one day I'm like, oh my God, like she just showed up because she had literally nothing but, no, we're not laughing at you. But it's just the fact of, still, how fucking sad is it that she'd rather go to detention.
Yeah, than be at home.
Man.
Yeah.
Like, dude, like that's like, again, the writing in this movie is why it's the best movie ever.
It's really like, it has so much credence to it. And it's just like, Allison's character is, I think that really like what this film does, instead of car crashes and jumping off of buildings and things like that, is that we get, the whole scene of John Bender acting out his home life and like, him like saying funny things. And there is physicality again with them running throughout the halls. And then like even him on top of the roofing or whatever. And then he falls through it or whatever. Yeah. Like the fact that she makes the lunch that she does is like, and when that she didn't need to be there, she brought everything she was going to need in case if she got hungry.
Yeah.
And it's like, everybody probably looks at that where it's like, oh, like, well, she just made her lunch weird. It's like, no, that was probably just a snack she had in her bag. It's like, oh, it's lunchtime. Yeah. Oh, I've got that. Like, and it's just, man, like it's so interesting. Like, I think that she's a character that you could truly dissect and do so much like studying on like, the way she speaks, what she says, the amount of time it takes for her to even say something. Like, it's just, Allison's character is beautiful, not only physically, but also inside too. And I think that that's what people really would miss about her with being, her peer, is that it's like, no, dude, like, she really does have a genuine nature to her. She's lashing out because of the bullshit she's gone through. And it's knowing that, and with Andrew's story, like Andrew's final, like, moment of, this is really why I'm here.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's all one continuous shot, and it's just this
going around him.
Just this tension is just being built this entire time. And when he's just like, he's like, he has to go home to his father and explain to him what I did to him. And he's like, how do you apologize for something like that?
Right.
Like, it's just like, you really see that even from the beginning when Andrew was in the car with his dad, that he is like just done. Like, it's like, it's like, I'll play my part and do what I got to do, but I'm done being your puppet or whatever. Like, I will do just enough.
Yep.
And it's just,
the fact, like, I actually kind of lightweight knew somebody like that growing up. And the fact that, from what I understood, they were really not into playing football and basketball and all these things, but it was kind of like an Andrew. They were fast, they were accurate, they were this, they were built like, and he could have gave two shits.
Yeah.
But the fact that, we went with that whole scenario of like why you find out he's there and all that stuff, like the fact that he had that remorse to him kind of just showed you where it was like, you're right. He's done with this, and he doesn't like this. He hates being a jock.
Yeah.
He has to do those things.
Yeah.
Because he's strong, he's weak, or whatever. And it's just like the stereotypes that were in this movie were real, and they still are real.
Yeah.
I think the 80s, 90s, and 2000s had a little bit more of that stereotype that was actually happening in schools. Like, I don't know what it's like now, but I know that was real stuff. Like, all of those characters were real people that I knew in real life, essentially.
Yes.
So, like, dude.
We can't get through this without talking about Brian, because I think Brian is the true left hook that nobody, like, especially, the people that are with him in the room, but also the audience, to find out why he is in detention.
And the funny thing is that, I don't mean to cut you off, but the funny thing is that why he was there and the story that he tells might be ridiculous to some people. And it's like, sure, it was because he was failing shop. Mm-hmm. Okay, why do you want to kill yourself because and it's because he got an F.
Yeah.
To have that lifestyle and to be put on that kind of pedestal is just the same as being the popular girl.
Yeah.
Being the jock. Like, it might have been a ridiculous reason for people to think why he wanted to do or why he was there, but it was a real reason for him.
Yes.
And he couldn't deal with it, like, at all. And it's like
I can't have an F.
And that, like, and that the little joke came through where it's like, have you seen some of the dopes that take shop? I take shop.
Yeah,
where
right.
It's like, he's like, I couldn't even pass this class.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So it's just the perspective that was put on him and like how to be is just as bad as everybody else's.
Yes.
Sometimes maybe even worse when it comes to stuff like that, because they have to be perfect all the time and in their parents' eyes. His mom wanted him to fucking figure out a way to study while he was there and he wasn't even supposed to.
Right.
She's like, well, you find a fucking way, basically.
Yeah, it's like, we're supposed to sit there and do nothing. It's detention. Like, it's just
it's ridiculous.
What I think stands out to me the most, and I've had my moments in high school, like whenever I've been, bullied, or more so middle school, because it's weird how that changes. When it's like in middle school, that's like the worst time to be a kid. And then like when you then cross over into I'm in my freshman year.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of when things tend to calm down, or at least they did for my situation. I get everybody has a different, kind of lifestyle in that aspect, but I've had my moments where somebody was, saying something to me where it was like, nah, dude, fuck you.
Yeah.
And the fact that he says it to Claire, and Claire has really been the only one, well, not excluding Andrew, but it's like when the whole thing came up about his virginity, and it's obviously why she was okay with him being a virgin, because she's a virgin too. And like she stuck up for him in one of the most vulnerable moments. But for him to look at her and just be like, he's like, you don't think I don't understand pressure? Well, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like, I think that's the moment that all of them were like, whoa, like that's the first time he's lashed out at anybody.
Yeah, like snapped.
And for him to just go into the whole process of why he was there, and even approaching the idea that it's like, man, like you, like, and Andrew looks at him and he's like, why'd you have a gun in your locker?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, again, like the jock is now the one that is, looking out for him. And it's like Brian, what is going on?
And he's like, well, you brought it up, man.
Right.
Like,
and it's
like, talk to us.
And what I love about what John Hughes did there was the fact that it is the darkest moment, I think, that happens in that entire movie. But the irony was that it was a flare gun.
Right.
It's like it
went off in my locker.
Yeah, right.
Was it a handgun? No, it was a flare gun. Yeah. It's just the fact of like, really? Like, oh fuck. It's not funny. No, it's not. No, okay, it's funny.
It's like, and it's so funny that that's the moment that they all kind of come back to ground zero, where
exactly.
They're like, we're okay again.
And the thing is that I like the fact that everybody had their moment and was quiet, but it's the fact that everybody gave respect to the other person while they were telling their story and stayed quiet.
Right.
You got to hear everything they were saying. It wasn't talking back and forth, for the most part, but Claire and
John.
I'm sorry. Claire and Brian kind of did there for a second, but it was mostly him talking.
Right.
But it was the fact that, like I said, they all gave each other respect and just sat and listened to what the other person had to say.
Now,
and then responded.
So in your opinion, do you think that was because at that point they had earned the respect of them, or just because they wanted to know? Which I don't think that either one is wrong, but it's interesting because it's like, what, like, you know, why were they all quiet? Because they shouldn't have been throughout the day. Like, you know, they couldn't gel for the majority. And now all of a sudden it's like they finally reached this point where it was like, let's just talk. You know,
I think it was probably more so in the fact of curiosity and being like, because you have to think having a school, like they don't really know each other because, buddy, we went to like very small schools.
It's astronomically
very small schools. So like, guys, I graduated with like 80 people. Like that's like one class for them. So like, you know, they're in a school with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. So I think they were interested in the fact of, well, no, what is Andrew like? Yeah. Okay, well, we already got John. Okay, well, what's up with Claire? Like, let me just figure this out. Like they were almost like, I guess studying them, but I think also a level of respect was already there because the day was pretty much over at that point. It was like towards like halfway through the movie, like they'd already done all the bullshit at the beginning, you know, like this was where it was kind of like coming to an end almost and like giving you that like sail out. But I don't know, like that was something that always stuck with me too, was just the fact that they all just were quiet. And heard each other's story and let them just give their like whole background or whatever it is. So, yeah.
So what I also think is interesting is that when Brian brings up the, you know, like what's going to happen to us on Monday, you know, he's like, and when Claire's like, are we still friends? And that's the first time that word is ever brought up. Are we still friends? And she is honest, and I love the way that John.
You are a bitch.
Well, it's like he probably has every reason to hate every single one of them, but this day in that moment, like he's still responding how John Bender would, but now it's justified. Like he is righteously angry
for sure,
because you know how fucked up it is to do that to somebody, and then the whole thing of like, okay, like are you gonna bring Allison with you to one of your like heavy metal
vomit parties?
Yeah, it's just like all this stuff, and like you can see him kind of have that moment of like, fuck, would I?
And then, or the fact you would just say that we were doing it, you know, so they wouldn't make fun of you or whatever, like, you know, and you're right. He has that moment of like, oh shit. And that's when you find out Allison's like, well, I don't have any friends. So
I wouldn't have the opportunity to even do that to you.
Right. Yeah.
It breaks my heart because in a way I've tried to process this movie since last night and I've thought about it a lot. And what did Monday look like for these people? And I have two schools of thought, is that maybe this is the day that changed all of their lives. And they were, you know, they truly like did change like who they were. And like, you know, Allison and Andrew, you know, did start holding hands in halls and started like, you know, going on dates and things like that. And Claire and John included, but there's a part of me that is thinking realistically. And it really does make me wonder if anything would have changed. Like, what if this detention was literally just a small, like, portion of their lives where they did get that reality check and they got to see it. But the second that they were back into their groove, it all melted away. And it's, again, I don't know if that's just me being a pessimist or whatever, but it's like, I'm really curious as to what their relationships looked like on Monday.
Yeah. I think that's a valid question. It's just the fact that the way that I feel the way that it went about on everything, like, you know, the way Andrew was looking at Allison, you know, even when she stole the patch off of his coat and she even like showed it to him and all this.
She's still her. Like, it's right. She's still quirky.
But he was like gazing into her eyes. Like he found somebody, and even the dad like did the double take, like, oh fuck, who was that? You know, like he could tell.
Yeah.
You know, Claire giving John the diamond earring. Like, I don't know. I feel like their relationships changed. And I think that, you know, with the fact of Brian kind of being still like the oddball out, if you will, he was still probably just one of those, they probably gave nods to, you know, whatever, said hi, but like, I don't know that they would have necessarily like hung out with him all the time. So like, that is kind of interesting, but I feel like that they all kind of pretty much had a little bit of a different approach at school anymore because, well, they're kind of all dating now. So it's just like, but that's interesting that you kind of think like that. Was like, fuck, what did happen?
Yeah. I mean, because I mean, we've watch like, on TV when it will give like the fun facts and stuff. And it like, I mean, some of the stuff is really depressing, but it's like, John Hughes talking about like where he thinks all the characters like would end up and things. And, specifically John, like his story doesn't exactly end well, like at all in that idea. But it's just, I don't know if it was just because of that influence, like knowing that John Hughes said that about Bender, like, but in the same hand, it's just like, man, like, that's something that has stayed with me since we've watched it, where it was like, again, I say it a lot, but to me, these are real flesh and blood people. And they are just, they're kind enough to allow these actors to step into their shoes and to show them, essentially, this is what this would be like, and you're going to show it in the best way. And this movie is special. It is platinum in the grand scheme of all the elements of movies because it is so uniquely itself. And a lot of movies borrow from all of like, the different tropes or things like that. Like, not that things weren't done before, but the Breakfast Club set a bar.
They did.
And it did something that I think should remain untouched.
But before we go into that, first of all, don't fuck it up and redo it ever.
Yeah.
Just don't. But they actually kind of did do something. It was iCarly had kind of like a weird spinoff that they did. I just remember it was years ago because one of my exes, her daughter used to watch the show, but I remember going, wait, this is the Breakfast Club. Like this, like down to like the scenarios that were happening.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, but that was different. That was like a show that was like, kind of like paying homage a little bit or just like poking fun. Don't redo the movie. And if you do, Kyle made a good point earlier.
Okay. TV executives, movie executives.
Like we know them personally.
Everybody that pulls the strings in the back to make all the cinematic stuff happen. If you are going to redo The Breakfast Club for whatever dumbass reason, what you need to do is, I think that people may disagree with this, but I think that you should change some characters. And what I mean is that we have, these 6 or 7 people that are thrown into detention and they represent everything that was normal at that point.
Sure.
And I think that if you were to take that lens of today, you would have the jock, you would have, the prissy girl, you would have the brain, you would have the troublemaker, you would have, like all these things. I'm not necessarily worried about that. What I hope that if they do this is that they focus on the fact that all of them have their phones. They're all looking at different things. Like maybe Bender's on the bleachers looking at porn or he's like, or listening to music and like, just like rocking out, doing his thing. Or Brian is reading the newest thing from Bill Gates or something. And then you have we get small little windows, the content doesn't matter. They are all on their phones. They get into detention. They have 8 hours that they're like, cool, like I'll just play Pac-Man or I'll do this or I'll scroll Facebook. And immediately, maybe it's probably the moment that everything explodes when all the phones get taken away. Now, all of these kids from the generation that is here now, they now have to suffer throughout the rest of the day without their phones.
Right.
And it forces them to have to talk to each other. And it forces all of that stuff. I think that there could be a compelling story to tell there if you were to try to touch this, which number one, again, it's like remaking Jaws. You just don't do it. Like they did it so right the first time. But man, I think The Breakfast Club is big enough that if it were to show up again in cinema and be something, new for the younger audience that's not seen it, that it probably could rock them. And in a way, it probably could cut a lot deeper. And it could do something where it's like, nah, dude, because there's the whole idea of, just like if when a trans character is thrown into a movie and people immediately are like, oh my God, it's like, well, no, dude, this is a part of our the generation that's here now. Right. There are people that identify with this, whether or not you think it is stupid or not. This is something that is here.
And that could potentially be something like that. Yeah.
Right. I think that I think that if you did it properly, because there's even some moments in the film, with my cousin my cousin Kendall, so it's there was kind of some things in there, they were very self-aware of that topic and that thing, but it was never shown because that wasn't really, I guess you could say, socially acceptable at that point or whatever. But there is so much that could be done with it that I think that I would actually be very interested, where I'd be like, all right, who's directing it? All right, who wrote the script? All right, like who do they get to play all these characters? Who do they get this? Like the sad part is we know that nothing is sacred, but it still, has the ability where it's like things can be done right. And even if they were to get it 80% right, it's better than them just, throwing something together and like just being like, okay, like we made the Breakfast Club and then we removed all of the heartfelt scenes. Like if you don't have a moment in the remake of all of them having that power circle and they're all just broken and like they're talking about
it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. It's the moment that truly shows who they are, and it's the main point, in my opinion, of the entire film is they're all the same.
Right.
They are all the same.
You realize, they're all, because that's one of my favorite lines that I've used for all my life is when Andrew was like, well, what's bizarre? Like, we're all a little bizarre. Some people are just better at hiding it.
Yeah. And
it's like, that's the truth. That's the absolute truth. Like everybody's got their weird things or their things that they like or that they do or whatever it might be. But like, you don't just tell everybody or whatever it is. Like there's things that like people probably don't know about you or that don't know about me or whatever it is. Right. It's like everybody has that thing. And that's where I think they all realized when he said that, where it was like, he's right.
Yeah.
He can't get an F. She doesn't have sex, or whatever, like, but you're the prissy girl and all this stuff. But like, regardless of what it is, they all realized, fuck, how did we not realize this? Essentially, like, how do we not understand that we can talk to another person, even though he's a jock, but he's going to understand, just like he did with Allison.
Yeah.
What did they do to you?
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, man, when you take that second to just step back from the scenario and look at everything, you go, whoa, how did I miss all this?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's when they just all realized that.
For sure. I got to say that taking in this movie as a kid and as an adult, I definitely had two very different perspectives.
Of course.
And I think that what I hold so close to my heart with this movie is the way that it really did affect me in, all these memories of, my school years coming back and, the friends that I had at that point, the friends I no longer talk to, the friends I've lost, whether it is to addiction or if it's like for like anything else. Like the Breakfast Club to me is special because it is so real. And it's something that I think that every young teenager should watch. I think that it's something where it's like almost kind of like how they say that everybody needs to work retail for a couple of years. Like, nah, dude, if you're in high school,
fast food.
You need to work fast food and you need to watch The Breakfast Club. It's like that's what's going to help you understand essentially how the real world really works. Because man, like I know that there's been plenty of people in my life that I have interacted with that I have made assumptions, as we all do. We judge everybody within the first 2 seconds of seeing them, and this movie does nothing but completely shatter that. And it doesn't just shatter it into a million pieces, it does it into a billion. Like you cannot put any of that back together once like everything is done. Like you could rebuild another sculpture that's very close, but there's going to be damage and there's going to be things that are very prevalent that have shown themselves. And it's this movie is so important. And I know this was a different kind of podcast in a way, like where we're focusing on a specific movie, but if you guys have been watching up to this point and if you've enjoyed it, please let us know if you like this kind of content. We're talking about doing one for The Birdcage, which is one of the best Robin Williams and Nathan Lane movies I think that has ever been made. And we love movies. We talk about them all the time. And this was us giving you guys a little bit of a window into something that we just absolutely love and adore. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed the conversation. We're going to wrap things up here. So Eric, as always, is there anything that you would like to tell the audience, whether it is relevant to the episode or anything that's happened tonight, or just anything you'd like them to know?
No, not really, other than watch our shit. Cheers.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. Love you all. See you next time.